Sir, this is a black tie event. Your attire is not appropriate, and I do not see your name on the guest list, the young event coordinator said, his voice dripping with condescension. He blocked the museum entrance, effectively barring the elderly man in the faded jacket. The man, Samuel Harmon, just nodded slightly, his eyes betraying a flicker of hurt before settling back into their usual quiet resignation. There must be a mistake, he murmured, clutching a worn envelope. Seconds later, the hushed elegance of the museum lobby shattered. If you believe respect is earned by character, not clothing, comment honor below. Samuel Harmon, known as Sam to the few who knew him, was 75 years old, though the lines on his face and the slight limp in his gait told a story of a much harder journey. He lived alone in a small apartment on the edge of town, subsisting on a modest pension and the occasional odd job fixing things for neighbors. He rarely spoke of his past, preferring the quiet company of his memories to the judgment of strangers. His prized possession was not displayed on any wall. It was a small tarnished medal kept in a shoebox under his bed alongside folded letters with fading ink and photographs of young men who never grew old. He spent his Tuesday afternoons volunteering at the VA hospital, not talking, but listening, a skill he had honed over decades. Tonight was different. Tonight, the City Museum was hosting its annual Night of Heroes Gala, honoring veterans and unveiling a new exhibit dedicated to the Korean War, a conflict that had shaped Sam's youth in ways few could comprehend. He had not planned on attending, finding such public displays uncomfortable. But he had received a personal handwritten invitation from the exhibit's curator, Dr. Eris Thorne, and academic Sam had reluctantly shared some carefully selected memories with months ago for research. The invitation felt like an obligation, a duty to the ghosts of his past, so he had put on his best trousers, a clean shirt, and his old but cherished brown leather bomber jacket, the closest thing he owned to formal wear. He clutched the worn envelope containing the invitation as he approached the gleaming museum doors, the sounds of clinking glasses and polite laughter drifting out into the cool night air. The entrance hall pulsed with wealth and influence. Tuxedos and glittering evening gowns moved through the space like pieces on a chessboard. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. Sam felt immediately out of place, the worn leather of his jacket absorbing the ambient light rather than reflecting it like the surrounding silk and jewels. He approached the check-in table, staffed by the sharply dressed young man, whose name tag read, Ethan, event coordinator. Ethan's eyes swept over Sam, taking in the jacket, the slightly worn look, the age, and his expression tightened almost imperceptibly, shifting from welcoming host to gatekeeper. "May I help you?" Ethan asked, his tone professional but cool. Sam held out the envelope. "Samuel Harmon, I believe I have an invitation." Ethan took the envelope, his fingers handling it as if it was soiled. He scanned a sleek tablet, tapping impatiently. "I do not see a Samuel Harmon on the main guest list, sir. This appears to be a supplementary invite from Dr. Thorne." He eyed Sam again, suspicion clear in his gaze. "Are you with the catering staff, or perhaps maintenance?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sam's jaw tightened slightly. "No, I was invited by Dr. Thorne personally for the exhibit." "Right?" Ethan drawled, unconvinced. He gestured vaguely at Sam's attire. "Well, regardless of the invitation, sir, this is strictly a black tie affair. The dress code is explicit. Jacket and tie minimum. Your bomber jacket is not appropriate." He lowered his voice slightly, leaning in. "Frankly, you do not look like you belong here. We need to maintain a certain standard." Several guests nearby overheard the exchange, turning to stare with poorly concealed curiosity or disdain. A woman whispered something to her companion, casting a pitying glance at Sam. The humiliation was quiet but potent, wrapping around Sam like the cold night air he just left. He felt a familiar urge to retreat, to fade back into the shadows where he usually resided. "The invitation does not mention a dress code," Sam stated quietly, his voice steady despite the tremor he felt inside. "And Dr. Thorne specifically asked me to attend." Ethan sighed dramatically, clearly losing patience. "Sir, I'm the event coordinator. It is my job to manage access and uphold the museum standards. Dr. Thorne may have extended a courtesy, but the rules still apply. I cannot make exceptions." He straightened up, his voice becoming louder, firmer. "You cannot enter dressed like that. Please step aside." You are holding up the line. Sam did not argue further. He simply stepped back from the table, the worn envelope still clutched in his hand. He moved towards the edge of the grand lobby, finding a spot near a velvet rope that cordoned off the entrance to the main gallery. He could see glimpses of the new exhibit. Inside, black and white photographs blown up large, display cases with artifacts, the low murmur of appreciative guests guided by docent. One photograph, partially visible, showed a group of young, weary soldiers huddled together in the snow. Sam recognized the landscape, the exhaustion etched on their faces. He felt a pang, a deep ache of memory that momentarily overshadowed the sting of the coordinator's dismissal. He stood there silently, a ghost at the feast, invisible to the glittering crowd that flowed past him. Some cast curious glances his way, wondering why the old man in the dated jacket was loitering near the entrance. Others did not register his presence at all, too absorbed in their conversations and champagne. He was not angry, not really. He was mostly just tired of being judged by appearances, tired of a world that valued polish over substance, tired of carrying memories that felt increasingly alien in the modern age. Dr. Thorne had been so insistent he come, saying his perspective was vital, that the exhibit was dedicated to men like him. Perhaps this was a sign. Perhaps he did not belong here among the sanitized recollections of a war that had been anything but sanitized for those who fought it. He considered leaving, slipping out unnoticed, returning to the quiet solitude of his apartment. But something held him there, a stubborn refusal to be erased completely, a need to bear witness, even from the margins. He watched as Ethan, the coordinator, smoothly greeted other guests, his smile bright and welcoming for those who fit the mold. Ethan cast a brief annoyed glance towards Sam, then turned back to his tablet, dismissing him once more. The low thrum of the gala continued, a world away from the snow-covered hills Sam was seeing in his mind's eye. He adjusted the collar of his bomber jacket, a familiar comfort against the sudden chill he felt despite the heated lobby. He decided he would wait just a few more minutes. Maybe Dr. Thorne would appear. If not, he would leave quietly. No fuss, no confrontation, just another quiet retreat. The minutes ticked by. 5 became 10. Guests continued to arrive, greeted with smiles and efficiency by Ethan. Sam remained by the velvet rope, an unobtrusive statue of resilience. A younger museum staffer, perhaps an intern, judging by her nervous energy, noticed him standing there and approached. Tentatively, "Excuse me, sir, are you waiting for someone? Can I help you find anything?" she asked kindly, her eyes lacking the judgment Sam had seen in Ethan's. Sam offered her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, dear. I was invited by Dr. Thorne, but my attire is not quite right for the evening, it seems." The intern glanced towards Ethan, then back at Sam, lowering her voice. "Mr. Harrison at the check-in can be a bit strict. Dr. Thorne mentioned he was expecting a special guest tonight, someone very important to the Korean War exhibit. Could that be you?" Before Sam could respond, Ethan noticed the intern talking to him and strode over, his expression sharp. "Maria, are you bothering this gentleman? He is already informed he cannot enter due to the dress code. Please return to your station." The intern flushed. "I was just asking if he needed assistance, Ethan." "His assistance is not required inside the gala," Ethan snapped, then turned back to Sam, his voice regaining its condescending edge. "Sir, I must insist you leave the lobby area now. If you loiter, I will have to call security." Sam met Ethan's gaze squarely this time, his quiet patience finally wearing thin. "I am waiting for Dr. Thorne as requested. I am not loitering." Ethan scoffed. "Dr. Thorne is currently occupied with our most distinguished guests. He will not be available to countermand Museum Policy 4. He waved a dismissive hand toward Sam's jacket. "This." Just as Ethan spoke the word "this," the revolving glass doors at the main entrance spun rapidly, depositing several figures into the lobby. 2 uniformed aides entered first, followed by a man whose presence immediately commanded the attention of everyone nearby. Tall, ramrod straight, wearing the immaculate dress uniform of a United States Army general. For silver stars gleaming on each shoulder pad, his chest a formidable array of colorful ribbons and medals. It was General Marcus Thorne, no relation to the curator, but a legendary figure in his own right, and the gala's guest of honor. The general paused just inside the entrance, his sharp eyes scanning the lobby, acknowledging the subtle nods and deferential looks from guests. His gaze swept past the check-in table, past the glittering crowd, and then it stopped, locking onto the figure standing quietly by the velvet rope. General Thorne's professional, slightly distant expression dissolved instantly, replaced by one of stunned recognition, then warmth, and finally profound respect. He changed direction immediately, ignoring the museum director who was hurrying forward to greet him, ignoring Ethan, who had snapped to attention. He strode directly towards Sam Harmon, his polished boots clicking purposefully on the marble floor. The lobby seemed to hold its collective breath. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Champagne glasses hovered halfway to lips. All eyes followed the four-star general as he bypassed the official welcome to approach the poorly dressed elderly man by the rope. Ethan watched, bewildered, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. The intern, Maria, gasped softly. Sam looked up as the general approached, a flicker of surprise crossing his own weathered features. He had not expected to see Marcus Thorne here. They had not crossed paths in years, though they shared history forged in brutal landscapes half a world away. General Thorne stopped directly in front of Sam, his posture radiating respect. He did not offer a handshake immediately. Instead, with military precision, he executed a flawless salute. Sergeant Major Harmon. The general's voice resonated through the suddenly silent lobby, clear and strong. It is an honor to see you here tonight, sir. Sam, caught off guard, but decades of ingrained discipline kicking in, slowly straightened his shoulders, standing taller than he had in years. He returned the salute, his hand perhaps trembling slightly, but the gesture firm. General Thorne, Sam replied, his voice quiet, but steady. Good to see you, Marcus. The general dropped his salute, but kept his gaze locked on Sam, a genuine smile lighting up his stern features. Sam, you old warhorse. I heard you might be here, but I did not dare hope. How are you? Then, noticing Sam standing outside the main event area, his smile faded slightly, replaced by a puzzled frown. What are you doing out here by the ropes, Sam? Should not you be inside front and center? This whole exhibit is practically dedicated to men like you. The question hung in the air, directed at Sam, but implicitly demanding an answer from anyone within earshot. The museum director looked mortified. Ethan, the coordinator, suddenly felt very, very cold, the earlier confidence draining from him like sand through an hourglass. Sam hesitated for a moment, glancing briefly at Ethan, then back at the general. Seems my jacket and I do not meet the dress code for the evening. Marcus, he said simply, without bitterness, just stating a fact. General Thorne's eyes narrowed instantly. The warmth vanished, replaced by a glacial fury that seemed to lower the temperature in the immediate vicinity. He turned slowly, deliberately, his four-star gaze pinning Ethan to the spot. Did you, the general began, his voice dangerously quiet, refuse entry to Sergeant Major Samuel Harmon? Ethan swallowed hard, his face paling. General, sir, I was unaware of the gentleman's identity. He was not on the main list, and the attire, museum policy, requires black tie. The general cut him off with a sharp chopping gesture. Policy, attire. He took a step closer to Ethan, his voice rising, but still controlled, laced with contempt. Let me tell you about this man's attire. The jacket he is wearing probably kept him alive through winters that would freeze the champagne in your glass solid. The lines on his face, earned in places you could not find on a map, defending the freedoms that allow you to stand here and enforce your petty rules. He gestured back toward Sam. This is Sergeant Major Samuel Harmon. He was my first platoon sergeant when I was a butterbar lieutenant fresh out of West Point. He taught me how to lead, how to survive, how to be a soldier. He dragged 3 wounded men, including myself, out of an ambush in the chosen reservoir basin under heavy fire while wounded himself. He refused evacuation until every last man of his was accounted for. The general's voice resonated with authority and raw emotion. He does not just meet the standards for this museum, son. Men like Sergeant Major Harmon are the standard. The history in those exhibits, he did not just study it. He lived it. He bled for it. He turned slightly, addressing the museum director, who looked ready to faint. Did you know Sergeant Major Harmon personally advised Dr. Thorne on the accuracy of the chosen reservoir display? Did you know that map, the centerpiece of the exhibit, was based on sketches Sergeant Major Harmon made during the withdrawal? The crowd murmured, stunned by the revelations. People who had earlier ignored Sam now stared at him with awe and dawning shame. Ethan looked utterly crushed, speechless. The general was not finished. His gaze swept the room, taking in the tuxedos, the jewels, the air of privileged detachment. General Thorne drew himself up to his full, imposing height. His voice, no longer quiet, boomed across the opulent lobby, silencing every whisper, commanding every eye. "This museum," he declared, his words sharp as shrapnel, "dedicates tonight to honoring heroes. Yet its representatives have turned away a man who embodies heroism more than anyone in this room. A man whose courage and sacrifice are the very reason we can gather here freely tonight." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. His gaze swept over the stunned faces of the wealthy patrons, the nervous museum staff, and landed again on Ethan, who seemed to shrink under the intensity. "You honor history with exhibits," the general continued, his voice ringing with righteous anger. "But you dishonor the men who made that history by judging them by the cost of their coat rather than the content of their character. You care more about maintaining an image than recognizing true greatness when it stands humbly before you." He took a deep breath, his decision made, his authority absolute. "As the guest of honor tonight, and as a representative of the United States Army, I cannot in good conscience participate in an event that begins with such profound disrespect shown to one of its finest." He turned towards the entrance, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This gala," he announced, each word a hammer blow, "is officially over. The military delegation will withdraw immediately. I suggest the rest of you reflect on what truly constitutes honor before you attend another event like this." He then turned back to Sam, his expression softening instantly. "Sergeant Major, allow me to escort you personally. There is an exhibit in there I believe you more than anyone deserve to see properly." The general offered Sam his arm. The two uniformed aides moved towards the door, relaying orders discreetly into their comms. A wave of confusion, shock, and frantic whispering swept through the crowd. The museum director rushed forward, stammering apologies, begging the general to reconsider. But General Thorne ignored him, focusing solely on Sam. "Let us go, Sam," he said gently. "Leave these people to their champagne." The shutdown was swift, decisive, and absolute. The honor guard, previously standing near the entrance, packed their colors and marched out. Other military personnel present began discreetly excusing themselves. The life seemed to drain from the party, the festive atmosphere evaporating under the weight of the general's condemnation. The gala, moments before a glittering affair, had imploded. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic within the museum walls, but profoundly quiet for Sam Harmon. As General Thorne escorted him away from the crumbling gala, Ethan, the coordinator, was being intensely questioned by a frantic museum director. News of the general shutting down the prestigious event spread through the remaining guests like wildfire, fueled by shocked whispers and urgent phone calls. The carefully curated evening of celebration had turned into a public relations nightmare. General Thorne led Sam not towards the exit, but towards the now sparsely populated main gallery, where the Korean War exhibit resided. Dr. Eris Thorne, the curator, finally located them, his face etched with concern and deep apology. "Sergeant Major Harmon, General, I am mortified," Dr. Thorne stammered. "I just heard what happened at the entrance." Ethan had no authority. "I am so deeply sorry." Sam simply nodded, accepting the apology without comment. General Thorne cut the curator off gently but firmly. "What is done, Doctor. The important thing is ensuring Sergeant Major Harmon sees the exhibit he contributed to." For the next hour, Sam Harmon received a private tour of the exhibit, guided by the curator and flanked by the four-star general. They paused longest at the chosen reservoir display. Sam looked at the blown-up photographs, the maps based on his own field sketches, the artifacts behind glass. He pointed out small details, corrected a caption softly, shared a brief, poignant memory triggered by a specific image. He spoke more in that hour than he usually did in a week. The presence of the general and the respectful attention of the curator seeming to unlock compartments of memory he usually kept sealed. News of the incident hit local media almost immediately. Headlines the next morning read, Gala disaster 4-star general shuts down museum event over disrespect to war hero. The story highlighted the contrast between the gala's theme and the treatment Sam received. Ethan was quietly dismissed from his position. The museum board issued a formal public apology to Sam Harmon and all veterans, announcing mandatory sensitivity training for all staff and a renewed commitment to accessibility. Donations poured into the museum, specifically earmarked for veterans programs and the upkeep of the Korean War exhibit, now imbued with a new layer of significance. Sam, uncomfortable with the sudden attention, politely declined interview requests, but accepted the museum's apology. Weeks turned into months. The Night of Heroes incident became a local legend, a cautionary tale about superficiality and the importance of looking beyond appearances. The museum's attendance increased, particularly for the Korean War exhibit, with many visitors specifically asking Docent about Sergeant Major Harmon's contributions. Sam continued his quiet life, volunteering at the VA, fixing things for neighbors. But something had shifted. People in his neighborhood seemed to look at him differently, with a newfound respect, though few knew the specifics of the museum incident. The local VFW Post, learning of his identity through the news reports, reached out and welcomed him into their fold, providing a camaraderie Sam had not realized he missed. General Thorne made it a point to visit Sam regularly. The bond forged in war rekindled in their later years. They would sit in Sam's small apartment drinking coffee, talking sometimes about the past, sometimes about nothing much at all. During one visit, the general looked at the tarnished metal Sam finally had displayed on a small shelf. "You know, Sam," the general said quietly, "that night at the museum, shutting it down was not just about the disrespect to you. It was about reminding everyone what those medals, what that history really cost. It is not just stories in glass cases. It is blood and sacrifice and endurance." Sam looked at the medal, then out the window. "People forget," he said softly. "It is easy to forget when life is comfortable. Then we have to keep reminding them," the general replied, not with anger necessarily, but with presence, with truth. Sam Harmon never sought recognition, but the night he was denied entry forced a reckoning. It reminded a city and perhaps a wider audience that heroes do not always wear uniforms or expensive suits. Sometimes they wear faded bomber jackets and carry the weight of history silently. Their value is not determined by event coordinators or dress codes, but by the courage etched into their past and the quiet dignity they maintain in the present. True honor does not need an invitation. It simply needs to be seen.